Some leaders win battles, a rare few change the way the whole world is arranged on the map. Alexander of Macedon, later called Alexander the Great, moved through history with the speed of a campaign and the confidence of someone who believed destiny had chosen him. In popular retellings, his name shines with glory, a young king, brilliant tactics, impossible distances and cities that carried Greek language and ideas across continents. But behind the celebration sits a harder record of what conquest often requires: harsh decisions, public examples meant to terrify, and entire communities forced to pay for the message of obedience. When a ruler begins to think he is more than human, compassion can become optional, and the cost is rarely paid by the king himself. Welcome to Medieval Spirits. Thanks for spending time with me today. If you enjoy calm, story-driven ancient history with a thoughtful lens, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell. It helps the channel and helps these longer episodes reach the right viewers. Today, we peel back the polished legend and look at the consequences that followed Alexander's ambition. We will visit Thebes, where a rapid response became a warning to Greece. We will follow the siege of Tyre, where resistance was answered with severe punishment. We will cross the Gedrosian desert, where a decision made for reputation turned into catastrophe. And we will look at Gaza and Persepolis, where victory was followed by actions meant to prove dominance. This is not a simple hero tale. It is a study of what greatness can demand from ordinary people when an empire is being built at full speed. In 335 B.C., the city of Thebes, one of the most powerful and storied city-states of Greece, chose defiance at the worst possible moment. Thebes believed Macedonian authority could be challenged, and that the old balance of Greek independence might still be restored. Alexander was barely 21 when the rebellion reached him, and he answered not with long negotiation but with decisive movement and overwhelming force. Within days, his army appeared, encircled the city with discipline, and began an assault intended to end the question quickly. Siege engines, infantry pressure, and coordinated attacks broke defenses that Thebes had trusted for years. The fall of Thebes was not only a military result, it was a political statement designed to convince every other city that hesitation would be punished and that the age of independent choice was closing fast. Ancient historian Diodorus Siculus recorded that Alexander razed the city to the ground, sparing only the temples and the house of the poet Pindar, a detail meant to highlight both power and selective symbolism. The rest of Thebes was dismantled, and the human cost was enormous. Ancient accounts suggest roughly 30,000 Thebans were killed or sold into slavery, a staggering number for a Greek city. Homes were destroyed, families separated, and a community that had once shaped Greek politics was removed from the board almost overnight. Such destruction was not a chaotic accident. It required organization, the sorting of captives, and decisions about what would remain and what would vanish. In other words, it was a policy, not merely a byproduct of battle. Alexander's message was unmistakable. Resistance would not be treated as a normal dispute between rivals, but as a threat to be eliminated for the sake of future obedience. Thebes became the example that other cities could not ignore. Greek envoys arrived with pledges of submission, not because they had suddenly admired Macedon, but because they had seen what refusal could mean. Fear traveled faster than armies, and it did Alexander's work for him. In that sense, Thebes was not only a conquered city, it was a warning sign placed at the entrance to a new political era, one in which a single king could decide the fate of cities that had once argued as equals. In 332 B.C., the island fortress of Tyre, the jewel of Phoenicia, also tested Alexander's patience. Protected by high walls and surrounded by the Mediterranean, Tyre believed its position made it secure, and that a king on the mainland could not force the sea to cooperate. Its refusal to submit was more than a local choice. It was a challenge to Alexander's authority and to the idea that momentum alone could carry him forward. What followed was one of the most famous sieges in antiquity. For 7 months, Alexander's forces constructed a causeway from the mainland to the city, a massive engineering project built under constant pressure from defenders. Tyrian counterattacks, fire ships, and the daily grind of labor turned the siege into a test of endurance. The effort shows something essential about Alexander. He did not accept obstacles as limits. He treated them as insults to be overcome. When the walls were finally breached, ancient sources describe a brutal reckoning. After months of losses and frustration, Macedonian troops entered the city with anger sharpened by the long siege and by the execution of captured comrades displayed by the defenders. Quintus Curtius Rufus reports that thousands of Tyrian defenders were killed during the final assault, and the city's suffering did not end with surrender. Alexander is said to have ordered a large public execution of surviving men along the shoreline, an action intended to be seen and remembered by anyone traveling the sea routes of the region. Whether the exact number was 2,000 or somewhat different, the point was the same. Tyre's resistance would be punished in a way that made future resistance less likely. Women and children, reported in some accounts as tens of thousands, were sold into slavery, scattering Tyrian families across the Mediterranean world. This was not only vengeance in the moment. It was a calculated consequence, removing a population, breaking its identity, and turning defeat into economic profit for the conqueror's system. Tyre had delayed Alexander's campaign schedule and forced him to spend time and resources he did not want to spend. The punishment, therefore, served a strategic purpose in his mind, a signal to other cities that time was not a bargaining chip. To hesitate to negotiate too firmly or to say no could mean losing not only a battle but everything. The once mighty Tyre, famous for maritime power and independence, was left quiet and reshaped under imperial control, its pride replaced by the reality of occupation. Yet Alexander's harshness did not always face outward. At times, his decisions placed his own army in danger, not because of military necessity, but because of pride and legacy. In 325 B.C., returning from the farthest reaches of the Indian campaign, Alexander chose a route that alarmed experienced voices. Instead of taking a safer northern path, he led the army across the Gedrosian desert, the modern Makran region of southern Iran and Pakistan. Ancient geographers described it as barren and punishing, with scarce water, intense heat, and terrain that could break even a prepared expedition. The decision would become one of the most debated moments of his career. According to historians like Arian, Alexander's aim was to surpass earlier Persian kings, especially Cyrus the Great, who had failed to cross the region successfully. It was in effect a contest with the past, a desire to prove that no predecessor could match him. What unfolded was not a glorious march, but a slow disaster. Large numbers of soldiers, camp followers, and animals died from thirst, exhaustion, and hunger. Ancient sources emphasize heat so severe that marching itself became dangerous, and that survival depended on small chances, finding a rare water source, avoiding getting lost, staying with the column. Estimates vary, but many accounts agree that only a fraction of the force completed the crossing. In moments like this, an army's discipline can unravel not through cowardice, but through sheer physical limits. Supplies dwindled, water sources were unreliable, and the harsh landscape punished every mistake. Storms and shifting sands could separate units, and the pace forced painful choices about who could be carried and who could not. The march offered no clear strategic benefit that justified the losses, and that is why it remains such a powerful example of ambition overriding prudence. Alexander wanted his name attached to a feat, and the price was paid by the ordinary people around him, soldiers, servants, and allies who had already marched thousands of miles. Even if we soften the most dramatic descriptions, the reality is grim enough. The conqueror who could defeat armies could not defeat geography, and the desert cared nothing for reputation. The Gedrosian March stands as one of antiquity's most punishing returns, remembered not for a battle won, but for endurance forced upon people who had little say in the decision. In trying to rival legends, Alexander created one of his own defined by loss, rather than triumph. And even after such suffering, his approach to punishment did not always become gentler. In 332 B.C.E., as Alexander advanced through the Levant, the fortified city of Gaza blocked the route between Syria and Egypt. Unlike cities that chose quick submission, Gaza resisted. Its commander Battus, a Persian loyalist, refused to yield, and the city's position on a high mound with strong walls made the siege costly. For Alexander, resistance at this point was not only a military problem, it was a personal challenge to the image of unstoppable momentum he had built. Gaza's defenses turned the siege into a hard test. For roughly 2 months, Alexander's forces used siege engines and repeated assaults while taking serious casualties. Sources report that Alexander himself was wounded during the fighting, a detail that matters because it likely affected his temper and his need to prove control. When Gaza finally fell, ancient accounts describe a response meant to erase defiance. Quintus Curtius Rufus says Battus was captured alive and brought before Alexander, still refusing to beg or flatter the conqueror. In a world where kings expected symbolic submission, that refusal carried weight. To Alexander, who increasingly adopted the language and rituals of exceptional status, Battus's stance could be taken as an insult not only to power, but to the idea that Alexander deserved special reverence. Ancient writers then describe a punishment modeled on Homeric imagery, echoing Achilles and Hector, as if Alexander wanted to stage his own epic in real time. Battus was tied behind a chariot and dragged around the city as a public demonstration of what resistance would earn. We do not need graphic detail to understand the purpose. It was theater meant to be remembered and meant to warn. The punishment also extended beyond the leader. Gaza's population, men, women, and children, was condemned to slavery, transforming a living community into spoils of conquest. In this way, punishment became both message and profit, a strategy that turned victory into a system. Estimates suggest tens of thousands were sold into bondage, uprooted, and scattered across the wider Hellenic world. Again, the point was not necessity in the strictest sense. The point was deterrence. A city that refused to submit became an example, and that example helped Alexander avoid future delays as he moved toward Egypt and the heart of Persia. Gaza, once a significant gateway and trading center, became a symbol of retribution. The logic of empire is often simple and cold: obey quickly and survive, resist and be broken. Alexander's career shows how effectively that logic can spread and how expensive it is for those caught on the wrong side of it. In 330 B.C.A., Alexander entered Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Persian Empire, and a powerful symbol of Persian identity. Persepolis was not merely a city of buildings. It was a statement in stone towering columns, carved reliefs, and grand halls designed to display imperial order and divine kingship. The Apadana, with its monumental stairways and artwork, represented centuries of rule and tradition. At first, sources suggest Alexander treated Persepolis with restraint, allowing plunder of treasure while leaving structures standing. The wealth was immense, accumulated over generations, and it was removed systematically, loaded onto long lines of mules and camels. Even that orderly looting was a kind of cultural injury, stripping an empire's center of its stored power and moving it to finance a new one. According to Diodorus Siculus, During a feast marked by heavy drinking, Alexander was persuaded, possibly by the courtesan that S, to set fire to the palace complex. Some sources present it as revenge for the Persian destruction of Athens, long before a symbolic balancing of the scales. Others present it as an impulsive decision fueled by celebration and alcohol. Either way, the result was devastating. Flames consumed the heart of the ceremonial center, damaging structures, art, and records that carried Persian memory. Even if we avoid the most dramatic imagery, the meaning is clear. When a conqueror burns a cultural capital, he is doing more than destroying wood and stone. He is declaring that the old identity has been defeated and that the conqueror now controls what will be remembered. This was more than damage. It was symbolic erasure, a gesture aimed at the idea of Persian kingship itself. Later accounts suggest Alexander regretted the act and may have attempted to stop it when he sobered, but regret does not rebuild what is lost. Persepolis became a monument to the double-edged nature of conquest. Victory brings access and wealth, but it can also tempt a ruler into actions that cannot be undone. In trying to forge a new world order, Alexander sometimes treated the past as something to clear away rather than something to understand. Persepolis stands as a reminder that empire can reshape culture not only by spreading ideas, but by destroying the places that held older ones. History often remembers Alexander as a visionary and a military genius, the founder of cities and the driver of Hellenistic culture across the ancient world. We see statues, mosaics, and the repeated name Alexandria on modern maps. But beneath the achievements lies a record of destruction that cannot be ignored if we want an honest picture. Cities were leveled, populations displaced, and communities sold into slavery. Cultural centers were damaged or burned. These were not always accidents of war. They were choices made to speed conquest and prevent future resistance. Alexander grew up reading Homer and admiring the Iliad, and some sources suggest he imagined himself as a hero from a mythic age. That mindset can inspire courage, but it can also be dangerous because it encourages a ruler to treat real people as characters in a story written for his glory. Power once seized can change the person who holds it. Many sources describe Alexander becoming more suspicious and more severe in his later years, especially as his court adopted Persian customs and as pressures of ruling a vast empire piled up. He demanded loyalty, sometimes demanded forms of honor that Greeks found uncomfortable, and in moments of anger he made decisions that harmed even those close to him. The deeper question is not whether he was good or evil in a modern sense. The deeper question is what his career reveals about the cost of unrestrained ambition. Can cultural exchange justify the suffering that made it possible? Does the spread of language, art, and administration outweigh the destruction of communities like Thebes, or the harsh punishments at Tyre and Gaza's empire creates new connections, but it can also leave long wounds? Let us know in the comments, was Alexander's hard path a necessity of empire, or a warning about power without limits? Plutarch wrote that so great was his ambition, and so small the world he conquered, a line that captures both admiration and unease. Alexander died at 32, astonishingly young for a man who had ruled so much land. And when he died, the structure he built did not hold together in peace. His generals divided the empire in a series of conflicts that reshaped the Hellenistic world for generations. In the end, the question of his legacy is not only about battles. It is also about what kind of world was left behind when the storm finally stopped moving. The story of Alexander is often told as a romance, the boy king riding to the ends of the earth. But it can also be read as a tragedy of ambition and consequence. To understand him, we have to look past the propaganda of victory and consider the lives that were overturned to create his legend. We have to think about Thebes turned into an example for Greece. We have to consider Tyre punished after a long refusal. We have to remember the losses in Gedrosian, where geography and pride combined into disaster. And we have to acknowledge Persepolis, where A symbolic center of an older empire was damaged beyond repair. Alexander was great in ability and in scale, but greatness is not the same as goodness, and admiration becomes dangerous when it refuses to count the cost. If you are eager to learn more about the real human side of ancient history, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell for more episodes with medieval spirits. We do not tell these stories to glorify suffering, but to understand how power works and why societies change. Let's keep exploring the ancient world together. There are countless stories still waiting to be uncovered. In the end, Alexander conquered an astonishing portion of the known world, but he could not control what conquest does to the people who follow it or to the memory of the places it touches. His legend remains magnificent, complicated, and deeply instructive, not only about victory, but about the responsibilities that victory demands.